If you, like me, are an avid reader and find the subject of UFOs fascinating to say the least, then this story might appeal to you. So on August 25th, 1951, three men are hanging out here in Lubbock, Texas on a beautiful summer's night. Can get quite warm at that time of year. It's probably in the upper 80s, maybe even the 90s. Three men, Dr. Robinson, who was a geologist, Dr. Gus Oberg, who was a professor of chemical engineering at Texas Tech University, and Dr. William Ducker, who was the professor of petroleum engineering at Texas Tech University. And a side note about Dr. William Ducker, he's actually the first human to ever survive a surgery for the Crohn's disease. So these three men, they're hanging out in the backyard. And according to the men, Dr. Ducker jumps out of his chair and he says, "What the hell is that?" Screamed it and kind of startled the men. They're looking at this guy like, what's going on with this dude? And he's like pointing and jumping up and down. He's like, look in the sky. He's like, what is that? And just as the camera just pans, it's gone. They only seen it for 3 seconds. And that's all it took. And Dr. Ducker looks at them. He said, "Did you just see that?" And the men did. What they seen was a series of lights flying in a V formation. They were bluish green. They flew so fast across the sky, they could barely register with their own eyes what they seen. And they were just amazed. They couldn't believe a vehicle that fast could travel that silently across the sky. Now, they knew that the Air Force nearby was flying a secret prototype plane. A lot of people say it was the beginnings of the SR-71 Blackbird. But when this plane, even in the 60s, the late 60s, early 70s, when this plane was being flown, this plane was very, very loud. There is no mistaking. I've heard a B-2 bomber fly near me, and that thing is so loud. You cannot concentrate on anything because that's how loud it is. You even feel it in your body. However, this was no SR-71 Blackbird. This was no B-2 bomber. And the next day, they're discussing it amongst themselves. And they're trying to figure out what they just seen. And according to Dr. Ducker's estimation, in later interviews, he said those lights, whatever that formation was, it was flying at least 50,000 feet in the air. And he says, this sounds crazy. He goes, but from when I watch a plane cross the sky and watch those lights were going at 50,000 miles an hour. And of course, people probably looked at this guy and like, okay, yeah, sure. Maybe he, had the surgery, had the Crohn's. Maybe he's crazy. Who knows? So the three men were resilient in wanting to find and see this thing again. So the next few nights, they would just stay in that backyard and keep looking up and talking amongst themselves. And finally, the lights, or the craft, whatever you want to call it, comes again on the 30th of August, 1951. And again, just flying across the sky. But this time, it flew a little bit slower. And Dr. Ducker, and they're all jumping out of their chairs. Look, there go the lights again. There go the lights again. And a few miles away was a man by the name of Carl Hart Jr. He was a freshman at Texas Tech University, and he was at home in his room, lying on his bed, just looking out the window, and he sees these lights. He sees the same thing that the professors are looking at. And he grabs his 35 millimeter camera, goes outside and takes a series of 5 photos. Now, these photos, granted, they were taken in 1951. Not many people had a camera back then. Now, according to eyewitnesses, those photos would look like this. Bluish greenish lights in a V-shaped formation. So the next day, you know, a lot of people, hundreds of people have seen these lights here in Lubbock. And people are asking their friends, hey, did you see the lights? Did you see the lights? Did you see the lights? And everybody's talking about it. And Carl Hart Jr., he takes his photos, he gets them developed, and he's looking at them. He's like, wow, this is amazing. And he goes to the local newspaper here in Lubbock, and he tells the editor, he's like, hey, I took some pictures of those lights. And the editor looks at these pictures. He says, are these fake? And Carl says, no, I swear to God. He goes, those are real. I took them out my backyard of my parents' house. And he says, look, he goes, I'll give you $10 for these pictures. He says, but listen, if you're lying to me and you're trying to fool me, he goes, I'm going to run you out of Lubbock, Texas. And Carl says, no, man. He goes, I wouldn't do that. Those pictures are real. So he buys the pictures for $10, prints them out on the newspaper. And next thing you know, the story starts picking up. And the photos were even featured in Life magazine, which at that time was a very huge publication. Millions of people read Life. And, you know, a very interesting topic of discussion is the Lubbock lights. Now, was it a UFO? There are some people out there that blame the lights. Oh, no, those are just birds. See, what happened was, according to, you know, people trying to make sense of this is, you know, birds were migrating and the lights from the city would reflect on their bellies. If you could believe it or not, that was the honest reason for the lights, according to some people, were birds. But birds don't fly at 50,000 feet and at 18,000 miles an hour. So who knows? Was it a UFO? Was it a bunch of birds that had mirrors for bellies and the lights were reflected off of them out, down, and then everyone is looking at this? You know, the UFO phenomenon is very near and dear to my heart personally because I've been a witness to a couple weird things in the sky. I'm not one of those crazy conspiracists, but I, for one, have seen things in the sky that have no reason for even being there or even existing. And this is the grave of Carl Hart Jr. This is the man who took the picture of the UFO or the lights, whatever you want to call it. And his story, along with the professor's story, commingled together to just be a part of UFO lore or the topic of ufology, which is the study of UFOs and extraterrestrials and aliens and what have you. And he lived a very normal life. He was a Boy Scout, Eagle Scout all his life, had a regular job, raised his family. These are his parents right here, Carl Hart Sr. So whatever you think about the topic of UFOs, I wanted to do this video because, you know, sometimes not all my videos need to be about murders and stuff. Sometimes it just could be a guy, he lived a long life. He just passed away September 24th of 2020. He was 87 years old. He lived a nice long life, and just something very remarkable happened to him. And his story was very well known in the ufology community. So rest in peace to Carl Hart Jr. And an unordinary life, except for a very unordinary thing. All right. I am Lamont at Large. I'll catch up with you on the next video. Peace out.